Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us for this session. This is called Exploring Opportunities in Agritourism. We're so excited to have you. I please encourage you all to use the chat, introduce yourselves, tell us where you're joining from, and feel free to use the chat to ask your questions throughout this presentation. We have a group of speakers today, so I'm going to go ahead and add them to the stream and allow them to introduce themselves before we get started. So give me just a second. Dave and Lisa and Will and Claudia, and then you all want me to bring up the screen, right? The starting screen. All right. So here we go. You all are at the bottom there. Again, it's cutting off a little bit, but maybe it'll get better when I remove myself. I do want to, before we get started, if it's okay, I want to just thank Cedar Grove Law for sponsoring this session. We encourage you all to please visit them at the exhibitor booth. They're awesome. And without further ado, we're going to get started.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Lamie from Clemson University. Wish I could be with you all in Raleigh or some other place face-to-face this year, but I think we're all kind of getting used to this, at least for the moment. But looking forward to the day when we can get together. But this is great that we have the technology and the ability to still reach you with some hopefully important and useful information today on agritourism. Before we get started, a couple of things. I'd like to introduce some co-presenters with me. So first, why don't we'll go in the order there on the slide. So Lisa, you're up first.
Good morning. I'm coming to you from University of Vermont Extension, where it's about 50 degrees and raining here. So I hope all of you are getting better weather down in the Carolinas, and wish I could be with you today in person. But glad we get to connect virtually. And I want to say that I'm already seeing in the chat some people typing in, their name, where they're from. These kinds of platforms are just really a challenge as compared to sitting in a room with everyone and going around the room and having everyone talk about what's important to them and where they're from. So at any point, please type into the chat, let us know who you are, where you're from, and especially if you have questions or things that you're hoping to get out of this session, we would love to hear that from you.
And on that note, I'd like you to add, if you would, are you currently operating an agritourism business? Or are you contemplating one? And if you've been at it for a while, let us know how long you've been at it, please. Will, I believe you're next.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Will Culler, and I am an extension agent with Clemson University, located in the Midlands of South Carolina. I play a number of different roles down here, county coordinator for the Lexington office, but my biggest role is research in agritourism, and I do a lot of that. And also I direct the South Carolina Ag and Art Tour, which is, I'll talk a little more about that in my presentation, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Will. Claudia?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Claudia Schmidt. I'm an assistant professor of marketing and local regional food systems at Penn State. I work on the agritourism program in Pennsylvania. And good morning to Angie, Ashton, Anna, and Grace. We love it when you introduce yourself, so it doesn't look like we're talking into the abyss. Thank you so much.
That's right. Please continue to use that chat out there to provide us some information on you so we can direct some messages to you. And I believe you can also begin to ask questions whenever, and when we get towards the end, we'll have some time to address your questions. So I'm Dave Lamie. I've worked at Clemson University in South Carolina for more than 16 years now. Before coming here, I worked some in agritourism back at Virginia Tech. That goes back about 25 years ago, back when agritourism was just starting to come on the scene in the United States. And I just started to kind of work back into this area recently, last few years. I was primarily doing extension work, more like Will is doing now. I had a beginning farmer program down here in South Carolina that I helped to establish, and I've transitioned more to agritourism as one of my research focuses now because I'm doing a lot more research because I see it as a really important area for new beginning farmers, other entrepreneurial farmers, those who are looking for some opportunities to diversify your income streams and finding good uses of your time, talents, and your creative energy to do something important, not only for your farm, but I think in many cases more broadly for society, helping people stay abreast of what's going on within agriculture and in the rural areas, urban audiences, and that sort of thing. Who we all desperately need to have a better, clearer understanding of what's going on in those areas. So there's a number of reasons for it. I've been very fortunate in the last couple of years as I've made this transition to link up with some different people across the country who just introduced themselves, and there are more, believe me, than just us here who are doing research and outreach extension work on the topic of agritourism because not only across this country, but you'll see later in the presentation, even globally, this is a phenomenon that's apparent with especially smaller farmers who are seeking to diversify their operations on a global scale. So without any further ado, Will, I'm going to have you advance the slide into that first presenter, who is you, Will. So would you please take it away? Will, you're muted, apparently.
Of course, I love it. Sorry. Hi again, guys. And like you mentioned earlier, my research is mainly in agritourism. I looked a number of different ways around, mostly South Carolina into North Carolina for that. I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the patterns and trends that I've seen out there that are going on right now, and that'll be a good base. I'm going to really stoke the fire here and get some stuff going for some great presenters that are going to come right after me. So let's go ahead and say, Dave mentioned a while ago the global market. I mean, the global market, goodness gracious, $70 million or $70 billion almost in 2019. Is fantastic, and you're looking at almost 120 billion by 2027. So that's just incredible what's happening with agritourism. It's not going away. It is actually picking up steam and going to be a big player in the very near future. So why agritourism? Why this discussion? Why are we going in this direction? There's a lot of research out there that's been going on, and I want to focus on two things here to begin with. One of them is tourist characteristics. I mentioned earlier that my research is in agritourism. I've been an extension agent for almost 17 years with the Clemson as an agribusiness agent. I got interested in tourism or agritourism 10, 12, 15 years ago because I was doing so much work in marketing, in ag marketing and ag business plans and other things. So I went back to Clemson and started a degree or a PhD degree in Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management, PRTM. That's led me to where I'm at today with the research I'm doing, specifically for my dissertation. But mostly I'm looking at agritourism across the country, the goals and characteristics, and looking at what's happening with the future of agritourism. So let's take a look at some of the tourist characteristics that are going on right now that I've come across in a lot of my studies. Tourists today are looking for adventure. They're looking for experiences. You hear that first and foremost. We're mostly seeing shorter vacations. This study was done before COVID, so COVID's kind of accentuated a lot of this stuff. Shorter vacations, closer to home, more family trips. Something we're seeing in the tourism world. Packages. People want to go and know what's going to be there for them when they get there. Heritage culture. Heritage and culture is something we've seen in the last 25 years. People really want to get back to their roots. They want to see what's happening, what's going in there. Food trends. Food trends have been happening. You've seen it. especially around Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, South Georgia. What's happened there, the food trends. That's where you think about first and foremost. Local foods, organic was a big hot name 10, 15 years ago. That's happening. Food trends. People are looking to diversify their food. They want to get back to what's happening in the local market, and dining and shopping. People from a tourist, specifically tourist, platform, they want to go and they want to go somewhere where they know they can get good food. They want to go unique experiences. So tourist characteristics are really driving a lot of what's happening in agritourism right now. We can also look at farm characteristics or farmer characteristics in the United States. What's happening there. Changes in economies of scale. Farms are getting larger. The small farm is having a harder time competing right now. The small and mid-sized farm. Industrialization is driving a lot of that. Advances in technology, farm consolidation. And then, of course, there's always the aging workforce. I know that there's been a couple of national agritourism studies done recently, including mine. And I find it interesting that both of those studies, the results were the average age of the agritourism operator was around 59 years old. And that actually coincides with what's happening with the farmer. So pretty cool stuff. But an aging workforce, all this is driving small and mid-sized farms to seek diversification, to seek other income streams, to stay afloat. And it's really what's happening. A new breed of farmer is coming out of this. That new breed of farmer is more typically oriented toward high-value niche products, direct to consumer, and going to farmers markets and really touching what the tourist is the consumer is looking for in today's world. This picture actually is Mill Village Farms, which is located on a high-rise in South Carolina, in Greenville, South Carolina. So pretty neat stuff. This young man is a nice, good young man. Current patterns that we're seeing, and I've seen across South Carolina and North Carolina, some of the current patterns are, atmosphere and ambiance. I mentioned authenticity earlier. People want that authenticity. They want to see the atmosphere that's happening around them. Everyone knows about the local farm wedding or the wedding venue that's popped up in your local community or your area. That video is obviously the video, the farm weddings that are popping up everywhere. People are opening up barns just to have a farm wedding. They're seeking that authenticity, or that for people to get back to their roots in a lot of ways. So one of the patterns that I've seen happening. Another is education. People are really driving back to the roots here, looking for education to be a big player in agritourism, in agri experience. Education is really playing a role. That's driving the youth. It's driving school children. It's driving a lot of people back to the farms. People want to get back to their roots. One of these is because, from a generational standpoint, the baby boomers, who are the grandparents now, largest generation at the time, for a long time, is now they want to bring their grandkids back to the farm. They want to show them what happened, and they want to embrace that, embrace their culture, embrace their heritage. And then lastly, I want to talk about collaboration. That's something that I've seen among agritourism operators in a big way. One of these two farms I work with, and they're actually on the South Carolina Ag and Art Tour. One's an alpaca farm and one's a strawberry U-pick. These guys started collaborating to bring in school tours. They're in a small town in South Carolina, and had a harder time getting school tours to actually come to their area. So what they were doing was they were bringing in, they collaborated together, and school tours they'll come through, and they'll come through the alpaca farm, they'll come through the strawberry U-pick, they'll go to the retail stores located on there. But it makes it valuable for that school or that school district to actually go to a group of farms instead of just one. It makes it a half day or a day long experience. Now, I know this is not something that is happening right now because of COVID. And one thing that they've done from that is they've actually done some virtual tours and sold to as far away as California, which is pretty great success stories. So there's a lot of information out there on virtual school tours and other things in that direction. I mentioned the Ag and Art Tour, and this is it's a free Ag and Art Tour that we do here in South Carolina. I've had last year we had over 120 agritourism venues on the tour in 11 counties. I had over 15,000 people participated in the tour, visitors on the farms in the tour. And what I focus on here in the Ag and Art Tour is not people that are typically, we get a lot of agritourism farms on the tour, but we also focus on those farms that may not want to be an agritourism farm. They may not want to have people come on their farm year round, but for one weekend out of the year, they're willing to do that. And it's a great collaboration that works out well. What's really worked well is when those farms really push the other farms in the Ag and Art Tour and really share their marketing strategy. And we get a whole, the visitors are really going along the whole tour. So it's just, it's been a great success story, and we're looking forward to the Ag and Art Tour in 2022. Last thing before I forget, before I end, I want to mention that I gave this presentation a while back, and we talk about creativity, and we talk about what do we need in agritourism right now? What do we need to be thinking about? I mentioned authenticity, and I mentioned a number of other areas that we need, some of the patterns that we've seen, from the education and from the youth and others. One of the things that I had a question. I was asked to give this presentation to the South Carolina Forestry Association about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and you might think, well, why the Forestry Association? Why would the Forestry Association want to hear more about agritourism, and specifically what they can do with agritourism? So I started doing a little bit of research, and you've got to keep your mind open here. So, from a forestry standpoint, more than 45 million people watch birds around their homes and away from their home. There's your forest right there. They join other wildlife watchers to contribute to nearly $80 billion to the U.S. economy. The information is out there. If you open up your mind and think strategically about your agritourism operation, about what you can do with just your forest land or just your farmland, or how you can actually bring in people to show the experience, you're going to have a success there. And I think it's a wonderful thing to see. People are actually starting to tap in. A lot of the research that's been done in the past on by the Fish and Wildlife and others that have shown that it's out there. People are really, they want to get out, they want to enjoy that experience. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to pass this off on to Lisa, who has got some great information for you on a great study that they've recently completed.
Thank you, Will. And I just want to thank everybody who's been typing into the chat and introducing themselves. I'm seeing Helena and Delphine making some connections there. Perfect. If we were together, we'd have some people, in the back of the room chatting with each other, trading business cards or brochures and connecting. I know it's hard to do that online, but that's where the chat feature comes in. So we invite all of you to, if you haven't already, introduce yourself. Let us know if you're already doing agritourism or just thinking about it, and jump in with questions anytime. They can be specifically about our presentation or just what you were hoping to learn by coming here today. What I'm going to talk about is a little more on the research side. So hopefully some of you like data, but with my colleagues, we'll apply it in ways that are useful for your agritourism operations. I'm going to talk about a multi-state project that I worked on with several of the folks here today, along with other colleagues around the country. Could I have the next slide, please? Yeah, Will can't go to sleep here. He's going to be switching the slides for me. Yeah. So one of the big questions that has a lot of different answers around the country, and even within specific states, it might vary. What is agritourism anyway? And there is a lot of disagreement in terms of are farmers market agritourism, or, do weddings count? What is agritourism? I'm not going to give you a clear and precise definition, but what I'll say is the core of agritourism in the U.S. can't speak for other countries here because they have their own definitions, but the core in the US is where there's agreement is when it's happening on a working farm, ranch, vineyard, aquaculture, or any type of sort of production. Could be a cidery, doesn't have to be farm, ranch, vineyard, aquaculture, but there's production, land or sea-based production going on. So it's a working operation, and it relates to, and the experiences relate to the agricultural production. So that's where, things that are kind of in the peripheral tier where people are a little uncertain of, is that agritourism? Some people would say yes, some people would say no, is if it's happening off a farm, farmer's market, for example. Some people say it doesn't count, it's not on the farm. Other people in other states might say yes. Another area of contention is, Will mentioned weddings, so I'll bring those up again. If there are things happening on a farm that aren't closely connected to agricultural production, then, some people say, not so much, we're not going to call that agritourism. It's got to have an educational component and be connected to agricultural production. Whether it's core or peripheral, we talk about 5 overlapping categories: education, direct sales of farm products, hospitality, including overnight lodging, outdoor recreation, get into the forestry that Will was talking about. There's a lot of hunting, fishing, horseback riding, being on trails, the outdoor recreation piece, and also the entertainment. And some of the entertainment pieces get a little sticky too, where, if you've got a bounce house or something, some people would say, yeah, sure, that's all part of agritourism. Other people would say, no, wait, where's the close connection to agricultural production? I'm not going to get into that battle right now of what's agritourism and what's not. But I'll just say that for the purposes of the study that we did, we defined agritourism as anything that's happening on a working farm, ranch, aquaculture, vineyard, working production area. For simplicity, I'm just going to say farm and not say the 5 things every time, but it's on a working farm and it's open to visitors. So if visitors are coming onto your agritourism operation for direct sales, for any kind of experience, we included them in our research. Could I have the next slide, Will? This was a 3-year project. We started off with interviews in quite a few states. And then we used what we learned from those interviews to create a survey. And this was an online survey. Next slide, please. In this online survey, we conducted it from November of 2019 through February of 2022. So just by coincidence, it happened to end right before COVID hit, which means we don't have information from this survey. We have other information, more anecdotal and other sources of data about what's happened to agritourism operations during COVID, and would be happy to talk about it. This survey, however, provides us with a baseline picture of agritourism around the country before COVID. We heard from over 1,800 respondents representing all 50 states. But as you can see in this map, not all the states were evenly represented, and the darker the state is, the more responses we got. Could I have the next slide, please? This slide shows you the breakdown by region. And I know you folks are all coming from the Carolinas. We got about 29% of our responses from the South. And the next few slides that I show you will show some comparisons between the different regions. I was thinking that might be interesting. But to give you an overview, like Will said, sort of an older farming population. Although 55 at one point sounded older to me, now 55 sounds like right. That doesn't sound old at all now that I'm there. But the average response, the average age of our respondents was 55 years old, and we did have a high percentage, 58% of respondents were female. So that's a little different in terms of the farming population, that we've got more females involved in agritourism, and a very highly educated group. Over 70% had a college degree, and this was our respondents were relatively experienced as well, with over half having more than 10 years of experience in agritourism. Could I have the next slide, Will? This, I'm doing a breakdown here by region. And again, the green is south. So this shows you the crops that are produced by region. And of course, this is the crops for our respondents. So it's a little different from what you would see from, if we're looking at all farms and not just looking at ones that are open to visitors here. And where the South led actually was animals and animal products. Almost half of the farms that responded, 48% in the South, had some sort of animal or animal product production. Over 60% had crops. Crops was the highest everywhere. And it was interesting looking over on the right-hand side. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor when I move it. No, you can't. It's Will's screen that you would see. So value-added products, we found that about 40% of the farms from the South also had value-added products, and which feels like a good amount, but it was interestingly relatively low compared to other parts of the country. So that, may be an area that some folks in the South may want to look more on, which is creating these value-added products and selling them direct from their agritourism operations. Could I have the next slide? This looks at the categories of farm experiences by region. Again, the green is the South. And here we see that the on-farm direct sales is, that's number one. Almost 80% of the farms are involved in on-farm direct sales. The South led the way with education. About 60% of farms in the South that are open to visitors are offering education. And the South also had quite a bit of events and entertainment. The South is leading the way with recreation, and everybody had a lower proportion of lodging, down more in the 20%, but a reasonable number of respondents did have lodging as well. Can I have the next slide? We have a ton of information about what respondents said, and this is, everything ranging from your challenges to the supports needed, to how profitable your farm was, to how supportive your environment is, and the connections and the resources that help your farm. So we've got a whole lot of information if anyone's interested, but for the sake of time, and I think also to move on to the applications and what does this data mean for me, I'm going to focus on challenges and supports. And here we found that across the U.S., liability issues and availability of capital were big areas of concern. Regulatory concerns were especially relevant on the West and less of an issue in the South. So I think you've got less regulations, less zoning barriers that concern you. However, in the South, one of the greatest challenges was e-connectivity. Next slide, please. Here's a list of the top 10 challenges across the country. And as you can see, some of them are kind of typical for any type of agricultural operation: time management, labor, especially these days. But some of these challenges, like liability, marketing, access for visitors, and managing visitor access, state and local regulations. Some of these are specifically for agritourism. Can I have the next slide, please? This slide focuses on what farms said they needed the most. Of the top 6, 4 of them related to marketing. And here we see social media marketing, marketing plan development, website management, and resources for the public on locating agritourism enterprises. Those were all top priorities. And remember, this is before COVID, but up there in the top 6, we saw legal and liability issues, and we also saw safety even before COVID. And what's happened since is the legal and liability issues have grown in importance, so has the safety, but the marketing certainly hasn't gone away. That's still an issue as well. So what my colleagues and I are working on now, in extension in the Carolinas, but around the country, is delivering programming and providing supports to help farms in these areas. Next slide, please, Will. This is a link that will drop into chat in just a moment. And this is a link that brings you to the survey data. So for those of you like me who like to geek out on data, this is the place to go. We'll also drop some links into chat, though, that send you to the tools and the resources that have come out of this project. And on that note, I want to hand it over to my colleague Claudia Schmidt from Penn State, who is going to talk about some next steps and some of the applications.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us this morning. So Lisa and Will, they gave a great overview on what agritourism is in general, and I'll talk about what to consider after you've settled into your agritourism activities and when you want to explore regional and local collaborations and trails. Next, please. All right, so there are many different ways agritourism operators can collaborate and increase the number of visitors or target a specific type or maybe a higher paying type of customer. Here are some examples I've seen. Producers can collaborate with hotels and B&Bs to get special pricing for advertisement. You can have value-added activities with vendors for different themes across a couple of farms. And Will has mentioned some of those already. Today, I will focus on trails because I don't have a lot of time. A relatively new thing are trails that focus on production steps along the value chain. A nice example is craft beverages that comes with the boom of the craft beer industry. So these are then the breweries and the farms that showcase the ingredients and all the production stages along the value chain. So that's a nice collaboration. And then we have festivals, apple or maple syrup festival, Halloween events, Christmas, and there are really endless opportunities. And now I just go through some different levels of collaborations with some examples. Next, please. All right. So as you've heard, I'm from Pennsylvania, so a lot of examples are from Pennsylvania and New York. So here's an example from Pennsylvania of a very loose collaboration, and I know you have them in North and South Carolina as well. So that's the Happy Valley Adventures initiative that was established by the Chamber of Business and Industry in Center County and the Tourism Bureau. So this is where Penn State is. It's really smack in the middle of Pennsylvania with not much around it, but it's home to Penn State, and they rely on football and the universities. So, and they included the Center County Tasting Trail, which is a craft beverage trail with a passport program. But what they provide is more like a listing and advertisement of farms and businesses, and they also support events. So this is a very common arrangement without any further incentives. Next, please. Here's a great example. I don't know if that's the oldest trail I could find. So that's a self-guided tour with a map and not a passport, but it's developed by one producer, and then he got more producers interested in this initiative. So that's been going on for a long time, since 1992. The Fruit Loop concept was developed by this one producer, and then he used grants to develop the first map and then collaborated again with the local business chamber and the Visitors Bureau. And now the trail is financed through members and advertisements in the brochure. Next, please. What's happening in North Carolina, you probably know. Here we have a listing of all agritourism businesses on the website of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. They also have a great app that has a couple of counties that are participating, that are showcasing all the agritourism businesses. It's still in development. They also have a couple of trails. Here's an example for the Farm Heritage Trail, but they also have the Sampson County Barn Quilt Trail and the Western North Carolina Cheese Trail. So these are mostly self-guided tours and there are no incentives, but as economists, we absolutely love incentives. And that leads us to passport programs. Next slide. And I'm moving south to South Carolina. You probably know about that too. So the South Carolina Agritourism Association launched an agritourism passport program, excuse me, in 2016 already. And here you can see the 2021 edition, and they offer prices for the stamps that visitors collect. So 10, if you visit 10 businesses, you can get a hat. If you visit 20, you can get a t-shirt. And I think this is a great opportunity, especially when you have some businesses that are off the beaten track, to encourage them to visit even more. Next slide. Here's another passport program that's organized by the Farm Bureau in Georgia. It's a statewide program, but it has roots for 3 different regions. And again, this is a big difference to New York and Pennsylvania, where everything is still on a county by county basis. I don't know if you can see it, probably not, but they also have a couple of really great incentives. The last one is even an interview with a local radio station if you visit all the farms. So you probably don't want to do that when you're an introvert. Next slide. There are also, as I mentioned before, craft beverages. You know, the whole rice in that area. They offer more incentive. They offer more opportunities. So there are a number of agritourism trails who also include wineries, breweries, and cideries as well. Here are some examples from New York and Pennsylvania. They are mostly county-based, so they're promoting their local businesses. These are great opportunities in rural areas when it's difficult to reach the critical mass of just farms for a trail or a festival or other collaborations. And then you can just have a number of different businesses come together. On the right, you can see a map of all the beer trails right now in Pennsylvania, and there are also a couple of wineries and breweries in the rural areas that have not been claimed yet, and we are working with them and their agritourism and the agritourism farms in the area to build some new trails. South Carolina has currently 95 craft breweries, and North Carolina whooping 359. So there would be plenty of opportunities to collaborate. Next slide. Thank you. There are many reasons why operators would like to collaborate with each other or with regional organizations to promote agritourism in the area. The most important reason is to increase revenue and to get more visitors onto the farm. For local tourism bureaus, it's important for them to have a more diverse offering for the region and also to create hotel revenue. So if you want to have the support of your local tourism bureau, it's always nice to mention hotel revenue. So that would be a good incentive for them. You can broaden the audience you reach, can get additional options for marketing, you can raise more resources, or you can apply for public funds, and I'll talk about that later on. It's also a great way to share resources and trail establishment costs or collaboration establishment costs, and you can also exchange information on what works best. Next slide. So if you want to find collaborators, I really love that picture. Where can you look? From our own experience and from the travel literature, we know that visitors have different travel patterns. So research suggests that 70% of visitors like to visit multiple destinations instead of one. Hence, collaborations are a great thing. And the visiting points, as it shows on this slide, they can be en route or organized as a base camp, or you can have a tour at a destination. Next. And here's just a summary of all the best practices I found So visitors are often looking for something else to do when they go somewhere. So I put the picture here again as a reminder. Visitors will stop by more operations or spend more money if if opportunities and attractions are really located close to each other. So they make it easier. So the goal is really to make it easier for your visitors. There's also regional focus. Over 80% of visitors go outside the counties where they're staying in a hotel or a B&B. So really the big picture is important here. That's also important for the tourism bureaus and the business chambers because they always like to stay in their county, but it's really important to consider the surrounding counties as well. There's the 1 to 4 rule, which means that on average, tourists expect 4 hours of experience for each hour of travel. So the activities offered should at least amount to this time, whatever tour or trail you put together. As I mentioned, maps and apps are a great way to advertise the trail or the collaboration, and incentives are really important to keep visitors going. And that's important when you have a farm or a winery or a brewery that's a little bit off the beaten path. And at Extension, we talk about it a lot. Not a lot of people are doing it. It's always important to survey your customers. Where do they come from? What do they like to experience, and how much do they like what you're doing? Because this can always give you more ideas. Next. All right. So if you want to collaborate with your local and municipal organizations, the first step would be really to contact them. There's some research into wine and beer trails that shows that incorporating destination marketing organizations, so tourism bureaus and business chambers and hotels, they're really important to the success of a trail. There are also funding opportunities. One example is the USDA Rural Business Development Grant, which provides technical assistance and training for small businesses in rural areas. Here's one example from Huntington, that's in Pennsylvania. The Huntington County Business and Industry got this grant, and they used it to finance an agritourism conference in March 2020. And I have fond memories because that's the last conference I presented in person quite a while ago. And they also gave mini grants to operators in their area that want to get into agritourism, and some one-on-one time with a consultant. Next slide. Also important are legal considerations. I have to stay very broad here because this really can apply to a lot of collaborations. There's always the issue of landowner liability, as you're probably aware of. If you're collaborating with someone, getting some type of contractual waivers is very important, especially with vendors on your farm. Get a business-to-business contract if necessary, get copies of insurance documents. It's also, so when you collaborate with people, it's all very exciting in the beginning, but it's also important to keep evaluating the partnerships and the collaborations you have created, because even though you are creating these personal relationships, it's important you're reaching your business goals, and you do need to evaluate them from time to time. And this is the end of my presentation. Now I'm handing it over again to Dave. And please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions or would like more resource material. Thanks. And follow me on Twitter.
Thank you, Claudia. Will, if you go ahead and advance the slides, I got a couple more out there toward the end, and then we're going to have a word from our sponsor. So go back one. Go back one slide, Will. No, now you need to advance a little bit more. There we go. So I got involved kind of at the tail end. This is going back to the national survey project that Lisa was involved in, and Claudia was part of that, and several other people across the country. And we weren't involved at Clemson at the beginning of that project. We actually met each other. I know Lisa and I met each other for the first time, along with at least one other from this project, when they were presenting over in the first international summit on agritourism in Bolzano, Italy. I was over there because I'd learned about it through a network of people based primarily in Europe that are working on sustainable development. And we were doing a little bit of agritourism research in South Carolina around the new and beginning farmers. We presented that research, met Lisa there, learned about their project, and we got involved with them in that. And while she was there with this international audience, and I always tell people when I went there, I surely expected to see Europeans and maybe a few Americans and other North Americans, but I did not expect to see people from virtually every continent on the globe that were there at that agritourism summit in the Dolomites, kind of hard to get to, region near the Alps in northern Italy near Austria. So kind of an expensive place to get to, kind of a hard place to get to, yet there were people there from Africa, Asia, Australia, others from the US, and of course Europe for sure, and virtually the entire world was there represented in some way. So that's where we learned and really appreciated the fact that this agritourism phenomena is global, expressing itself differently in different places. But almost all of them had this need for some kind of data to understand what was going on in their own country. And so the idea of expanding this survey into other countries became very relevant there. And even the places where agritourism really is the most mature in terms of its development, namely Italy, France, places like that, they hadn't collected the data in the way that we had here in the US either. And so there was this need for that. So a number of us have been involved in doing that work with an international network of people, dealing with doing translations, figuring out how we're going to share data, all these things. Basically bootstrapping the effort. We still are looking for funding to do this work in a more robust way. But we have surveys going right now in Brazil, getting started in Italy, and then France is on board soon. We'll be in Canada, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and even the country of Georgia is interested right now. They're kind of lining up to do this work. So we should have additional data to compare ourselves to. We hope that we'll find innovations that we can learn from in these other places to bring back to the United States and down to the Carolinas as well. So Will, could you advance, please? So another set of events that there's a couple of slides here on them that came out of that first conference in Italy was the idea of doing a similar event in the US. And I know Lisa is heading this up in Vermont. Right now it's set for August 30th to September 1st of 2022. With COVID, we tried in 2020 and 2021, but we keep pushing it back. So this one's going to stick. We're bound and determined to make it stick. So any of you that have an interest in participating in this conference, know that it is out there. There's the link. Also know that until the end of this month, that there's an opportunity for you to submit presentation proposals to this event. And Lisa, I think, will shake her head yes when I say you are interested in farmers and agritourism operators, as well as academics and policymakers, and NGO people, and everyone else. So definitely don't count yourself out. Submit a proposal and plan to attend. If you can imagine what it might look like at that time of year in Vermont after making our way through a very hot and humid summer in the Carolinas, it's very good timing for us down here. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide. Connected to this, and from the network that we established and we continue to build on from people across the globe, when we did not have those conferences in the last couple of years, we held off because of COVID. We had a lot of people interested in presenting good information in a series of webinars from all over the world on kind of international agritourism topics. And there's been a series of these out there, and there's still a couple remaining, as you can see here. So there is the website for that as well. So please go participate and learn even more and get yourself interested in thinking about what you're doing as part of a global phenomenon. So I think I'm going to wrap there on what I'm presenting, and I think Rachel told me this is time for a little moment with our sponsor, and then we're going to come back and try to field the questions that you've been putting in the links.
Yep, thank you all so much. So let me get this going. Let's see how this works. I'm going to remove us for a minute, if that's okay.
Introducing Cedar Grove Law. Founded in 2020, a new legal resource for farmers across North Carolina.
I'm John at Cedar Grove Law. I'm both a farmer and a lawyer. My wife and I started Cedar Grove Law to help out farmers and families. We know there are a lot of business and legal needs out there, and we're here to help you. So come down and see me at Cedar Grove Law.
Whether you need help with business formation, contract negotiation, human resources, and land use planning, we've got you covered. Find us online at cedargrove.law or on social media at Cedar Grove Law.
Awesome. Thank you again, Cedar Grove. They will be in the virtual trade show rooms. So please check them out. Go say hi. They're incredibly friendly and they've been super helpful so far. So without further ado, I'm going to add you all back in here. Here we go. Bring our speakers back. Now, do you all want me to bring the presentation back as well, or are you done with the slides?
I think we're done with the slides. So I do see a question that relates to the slides here to Lisa from Samantha Gasson. Do you see that in there, Lisa, where she's asking about how we controlled for female operators who or non-operators potentially who answered the survey?
Yeah, that's a great point. And what I will say is we did not, I don't believe we controlled for it in the way that, you know, you're asking. We didn't specifically say who is, you know, how many people are involved and what genders are they. We just asked the gender of the person filling out the survey, and we sent the survey to, the survey was distributed in a few different ways in states where, like in Vermont, where we had a list to draw from. We sent it to the owner operator, the primary contact there. However, around the country, it was just a link that was shared through associations and different networks, and anyone could have logged on and filled it out for their particular farm. We made sure that farms were not double counted, that if we had, you know, 2 responses, we brought them together. But we did not specifically say, you know, who's filling this out and what is your role. And I think that's a really good point and something that we should address in the future. And one of the issues I wanted to bring up is that we're working closely with this whole team here, but especially with Claudia, who is planning to conduct a follow-up survey that will repeat many of the questions. So we'll get to see some changes over time and understand more about the impacts of COVID, but that will also ask questions about roles of gender and the regulatory support environment that you have where you are. And I believe that survey is going to launch in February, and we'll be working with folks in North Carolina and South Carolina, like Dave and Will and Carla Barbieri and her team. And, you know, many of you here, Rachel will reach out, Rachel Clark, who's moderating, will reach out to all these folks we've met to say, hey, here's a new survey. Can you help us share this with your producers? And Claudia has been, in particular, doing a lot of work on gender and agritourism. So do you want to weigh in, Claudia?
Sure. There's actually research from North Carolina that shows that more women are involved in agritourism. There's a lot of rural sociology research out there that has been investigating this issue. And you've probably seen the new census, the new 2017 census, which counts the operators now differently, and now they count up to 4 operators. So since then, we actually have seen that huge jump in the number of female operators of farms, because many women, collaboratively make decisions with their husbands. And unless we dig really deep into very detailed farm information, we really don't know what role these women are playing on the farm. The census has been looking at what kind of decisions those operators are making, and it says women are more involved into the bookkeeping and the financial aspects, and men are mostly doing more like the livestock and the crop and the cropping decisions and so on. But that's definitely a really good point, and that's something we will incorporate in the next survey by just asking like who's operating who's managing the agritourism activities on your farm, instead of just asking like, who's the what's your gender, whoever is filling out the survey. That's a great point. Thank you.
And I want to, if you don't mind, I'll jump to some other questions in the chat here, where Grace shared an excellent mini documentary about women in agritourism from North Carolina. So hopefully you all can access it in chat. I mean, I want to acknowledge North Carolina as one of the leaders in work with agritourism, and in particular looking at gender roles there. So we're, while we're doing our research, we're also collaborating and looking to the many studies that have been coming out of North Carolina. And gets to Rachel's question about, she said she's working on her farm's business plan and would like to include data around agritourism. So the answer is yes, absolutely. Reference this study, and you can find the information online to sort of the reports as well as some of the journal publications, or feel free to email me directly if you're looking for something that you don't see. And if you're specifically looking for South Carolina or North Carolina data, then, if you're not already in touch with our colleagues there, we'll connect you. But definitely reference this survey and reference these reports in your business plans and in your justifications for why you need support for your agritourism operations.
Yeah, and I was going to mention something related to that too. Is I was heavily involved with beginning farmer training, and business plan development was at the heart of what we did in that training. And a couple of things that I didn't point out earlier. One thing that's really important about this survey that was done was that a lot of people will go to the existing data sources that are out there. So typically people would go to the Census of Agriculture that Claudia mentioned, to look for information there to try to substantiate this, to understand what's going on in terms of trends, perhaps. But there's really not a lot of information being gathered at that point. You have to be very creative in the way you perhaps interpret it. And so that was part of the rationale for doing this work and the continuing this area, is that there are not other, authoritative or many authoritative data sources that can be used to answer those questions. So I think you'll find that if you go to Lisa's site there around this project, there's this survey work, but there's also other resources that she's been able to assemble, and connections to other states that have resources and that sort of thing that you might find beneficial. I will also say that in that beginning farmer program that we've ran now for I think 12 years or so, the demographics that we saw in there, women played a very substantial role in terms of the participants in the program. We were I think above 50%, always hovered around 50, and that was a much different demographic than you would find in, say, a typical Farm Bureau meeting, where you have older established farmers present, or another commodity grower meeting in our state. So there's a real shift you can see there in the newer farmers, the beginning farmers, the more entrepreneurial ones, the ones that perhaps are more likely to be involved in agritourism. And I think those same demographics, in the several times I've visited CFSA conferences, they were there as well. A much higher percentage of women involved there than in your typical agriculture production related events that we see elsewhere. Are there other questions out there?
Yes, I see some questions from Helena and Grace that I think One of them, Helena, I'm going to throw this question to our moderator, Rachel. Helena says, I would love to get a copy of the What is Agritourism slide with the visual and the DOI article link that was the source, or better yet, all of the slides if presenters are comfortable. So I'm actually, I think for all of us, we'd love to share our PDF with you. And if this recording is available, be happy to share that as well. So I'll turn to Rachel to tell us how that works. And then hopefully we'll still have time for Grace's question.
Yeah. So the recording will be up in the app. Usually Ashley, our communications manager, has been super fast. So it's usually within 24 to 48 hours. This recording will be exactly where you all found this in the agenda in the app. And I do believe we can also attach documents there, but I may need to follow up on that. This question has come up in other sessions, but we can get the slides to you either directly or on the app for sure.
Well, what I'll do is right after this ends, Rachel, I can email to you the PDF of the slides, and then you can share that. I'm assuming this is okay with Dave, Will, and Claudia. Share that PDF with everyone.
Perfectly fine.
Perfect. I will I'll send you, Lisa, I'll send you my email in this private chat.
Okay, perfect. And let's see, we have a question from Grace. So I can read it here. In North Carolina, we have an initiative out of North Carolina State called People First Tourism, which I've heard of and which is awesome, that works with micro entrepreneurs to promote small, authentic tourism experiences. And it seems sort of like a different style of collaborative agritourism, which I totally agree with. Do y'all see anything similar in your work or states promoting small entrepreneurs through agritourism? And I'll jump in. I think all of us will want to speak to this because it's an excellent question, but I'm going to say that in Vermont, most of our operations are small. And we are, our small farms are partnering a lot with a lot of other types of businesses, other types of micro entrepreneurs to work together. So I'm a little unclear. I guess I could answer it for two ways. One is, I think in Vermont, we have a focus on, the small, the authenticity, the place-based experiences, not so much the kind of bigger, more theme park, more like kind of Disney types of experiences. I think that's something that in Vermont, we're seeing a lot of demand for, that authenticity, that education, that very real experience that's up close and personal with the farmers. And we see that as beneficial, not only for the visitors, but also for the farmers, for developing their relationships and really doing agritourism that feels true to their production and overall holistic and sustainable farm goals. And many of them are partnering with whether it's restaurants or breweries or creating trails or, different art establishments, different crafters. So I think this, that focus on the small and the authenticity is actually, in my biased perspective, I think it's the heart of agritourism, although I recognize that in other places around the country, there's a different mentality and it's more focused on, large crowds, large events, and like kind of more of an agritainment model. So I'm not sure, Grace, if that's answering your question, but I'd love to also hear from my colleagues, and you can follow up in chat as well. And I'll share my email address in chat through Rachel. I'm sure you've realized we can't actually type directly into chat as presenters. So we're going through, thanks to Rachel for handling this back and forth, and I'll open it up to my colleagues now.
I'm going to throw one thing out there, just an idea, and if people could respond in chat to this, or if they want to get back to me via email, that'd be fine. But it occurs to me that this group here, knowing something about you, might be some that are primed for some kind of an opportunity like this. I have led study tours over in Europe, looking more at local food system operations and some agritourism as well. And we brought groups over there, and they've learned quite a bit that they brought back home and are able to implement. I think from the team that we have assembled here, Lisa, Claudia, Will, and others that we work with, that if there was that kind of interest, once we're past COVID and things are opening up more, and those opportunities are once again there, I think you would find interest amongst us through these international networks that we have been establishing to do some of that kind of exchanging back and forth, and maybe bringing some people from abroad here too to do tours stateside so they can see how we do things here. So if that's of interest to any of you, I definitely would appreciate an email or a note in the chat or something like that. Any other questions out there that we need to address? I think we've got a few minutes over, Rachel. Maybe you need to reel us back in and tell us what we need to do from here.
I think we should wrap up. I'm back in, so I have to log in every time to add stuff to the chat. So I will get your emails up on the platform after the fact in the same section for this. So I apologize if that I can't log anymore because I guess we're over time. But those that are already in it can still see it. But I see everyone saying thank you. Everyone's thanking you all. I want to thank you all for your time today. Again, I will get your emails up there for folks to reach out to you. And also, I believe you had your emails in the slides as well. So that'll help when we get those slides out to folks. So thank you all so much. Thank you all to Cedar Grove Law and to all the participants today who asked questions and watched this session. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.